Welcome back, everyone. We have a couple more people coming back in. How was everyone's conversation? Yeah, good. Does anybody have anything they want to share from their moments together?
I can share. I was in a group with Victoria and Shmuel. Is that correct? Correct me if that's wrong. But yeah, we were talking. We have some questions coming into this about like what's the difference or pros and cons of like indoor and outdoor mushroom cultivation. Also, like growing on invasives, like growing on invasive logs, like mimosa. And yeah, one more. I forgot what it was. Or like how to revive logs that might have gotten dried out, if that's possible. So those are some of the questions that came up in our group. Yeah. I'll pass it on to anyone else who wants to share.
Yeah. Anybody else have some thoughts about their breakout they want to share? If not, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our presenter for today. All right, well, let's get going. Please welcome Mark Haynes. He will be walking us through mushroom cultivation today. Mark is a 6th generation farmer with a BS and MS in forestry. His family is 9-year vendors at the Palafox Market in Pensacola, Florida, where they sell mushrooms they've grown and foraged. He's the author of 2 books, Year of the Pig and Border Walk. Links to those will be put in the chat, by the way, and currently works at the Forest Technology Instructor with the LBW Community College in Andalusia. So thank you, Mark, for being here so much. Thank you. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sophie. Okay, you want me to jump in?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's see. And how do we look? We seeing the PowerPoint?
I am not.
We all good? You're not?
I don't see it. Of course, it was working beautifully a moment ago.
Okay, I'm gonna go back. Let me come back. Now, tab. Share screen. Oh yeah. Share. There. Okay. I skipped one step. How about that?
Looks like it's coming. There we go. Yes.
There we go. Okay. Okay. Fantastic. All right. And I apologize. I think I sent you an old bio. We're actually 12-year vendors at the Palafox Market, and I've retired from that teaching job. So that's what I do full time now. So, very, very excited to be here today on behalf of the Alabama Sustainable Agriculture Network, and I'm going to primarily talk about growing mushrooms outside, and I will happily contrast that with what I know about growing mushrooms inside. I've got several slides on utilizing invasive species, and let me see, how do we revive logs? I'll try to get into every one of those during my PowerPoint. Any point or any ones that I miss, jump in and let me know and I'll address them. We started inoculating logs in 2012. I've been foraging mushrooms since I was a little kid, so I've probably got about 45 years of foraging in, but only about a decade now of growing them on logs and totems. We're located in Covington County, Alabama, which is bordering the Florida Panhandle, and we get about 60 inches of rain annually. So I think what we share today is going to be pretty good and applicable anywhere in the southeastern U.S. They do, especially outside Shiitake and lion's mane production, all the way up into Canada. But depending on your environment, you know, there's going to be some differences in what you can do and how you go about it. But again, we're getting about the equivalent of 60 inches of annual precipitation. That might be something like half a meter of annual rain. We market our mushrooms locally, but the vast majority of them we sell at the farmers market in Pensacola. And we're aiming to produce and forage mushrooms year round. So that's gonna have a big impact on which strains and species of mushrooms we use. And we inoculate about 1,000 logs or totems annually. The question you're going to want to ask before you get into this, are you just going to be growing for home consumption? Or are you going to be growing them to sell, or both? What mushrooms do you want to grow? What woods are available? Which methods am I going to use? And that's going to depend on which mushrooms you want to grow and which woods are available. And how do you time the harvest? Where are you going to market these if you're intending to sell? Now, we sell, like it's been pointed out, at the Palafox Market in Pensacola. This is one of the best farmers markets on the Gulf Coast. And you're going to probably need an urban farmers market, or at least quite a few restaurants within a reasonable drive, if you want to do this and make money at it. I think it's going to be pretty difficult to sell a lot of mushrooms in a small town in Alabama or wherever you're at. You need an urban population. A lot of people are interested in mushrooms, and I'm seeing a growing interest. I think not just in the United States, but probably across the planet. But you need a sizable population somewhere to sell those mushrooms. We consistently attend the market. We average about 45 Saturdays annually. We maintain a Facebook page called Sweet Bills Mushrooms and Smoking Woods. You can find us by searching on those terms. We take a lot of photos. And I've been running a business. Previously, it was a hardwood tree nursery for, if you add it on to our time, for about 20, 25 years now. And I never felt that I got any return on ads until I started doing these sponsoring Facebook ads. And for $10, I can take a nice picture of our mushrooms we harvested that week, and I can target it into the age I want and the location I want. I can target Pensacola, and we're getting a real good response from those small investments that we're making in those ads. And we do them pretty regularly. I'd say I generally do about one a month for my mushrooms, and about one every other week for our lumber and smoking woods and other products like that. We maintain a weekly email list, because a lot of people who find our mushrooms, they might not be regulars at the market, but when they know a certain mushroom is going to be there, they're going to make an effort to come to the market. So we get a lot of customers to come specifically to buy our mushrooms. And especially if you're foraging, you're growing outside, it's all weather dependent, and there's going to be a tremendous variation of what you're selling over that time period, 52 weeks in that year. And you're going to want to learn your terminology, and it's not that hard. The more you get into this and the more excited you are about mycology, the science of growing mushrooms, you're going to learn the names, the difference between a species versus a strain, the difference between mycelia and spores. And your customers want that. They want to know that they're not buying a poisonous toadstool. And of course, I'm doing a lot of foraging, so we're bringing about probably 12 to 15 mushrooms that we grow annually, but another 24 to maybe 36 that we forage from the forest. How do you want to do this? Is it something that you want to devote, every Saturday to? And a lot of people don't. They just want to do it over a short period of time. And you can concentrate your harvest simply by selecting a couple strains, 1 or 2 strains of Shiitake, for example. And because you're growing these outside, the what we call the flush, that's when the mushrooms come out, is going to be triggered by weather. So if you do all, I'm going to use an example of a strain I use a lot. It's called WR46 by Field and Forest. If you just select that strain, they're all going to fruit at the same time. And then they're going to have what's called a rest period. And then the weather will trigger them again, and you'll get another flush. But you might only get 2 or 3 of these in the winter months. And then you can, you're not dealing with them most of the rest of the year.
Mark, we have a question from the chat.
One thing you can do is, very good.
The question from the chat is, how do you safeguard your foraging matter against over-harvesting?
Foraging? Okay, how do we safeguard against over-harvesting and foraging? And, well, another thing I encourage people to do is to join groups. I know there's reasons you don't want to spend all day on Facebook, but there's some fantastic groups like Alabama Mushroom Society, and we go out there, and it comes up. This question comes up a lot. Harvesting mushrooms is equivalent to picking the apples off an apple tree. It doesn't matter if you harvest apples to the health of the tree. It doesn't matter how much it's going to produce next year, whether you harvest all of them, none of them, or just some of them. That is the fruiting body. The actual organism is the tree. And in the case of the mushroom, it is the mycelia that is in the soil or in the log. And so the mushroom, the fruiting body, that's what we eat. It produces that for reproduction. Now, but whether you harvest all or some of them really has almost no impact upon the organism itself. Now, as far as spreading, and creating more mushrooms, if you was to harvest all of them every time, I could see where you could keep new mushrooms from getting established. But mushrooms are so ephemeral. And where I'm out foraging, I'm generally the only person who's out foraging these large areas. And maybe I'll harvest one, I'm just guessing, out of 1,000 mushrooms that is out there. This is going to be more of a concern around, I would say, the West Coast and on public lands, because there's a big culture around wild foraging mushrooms, so that the National Forest then will issue permits, and they're going to control us and try to reduce, so there's not too much pressure on that area. But it's not a concern locally here in the Southeast. I don't think we're having any impact at all here. Hope that addresses the question.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. This gets back into one of the questions that Mars brought up. What can you do to revive a log? One of basically the cardinal sins of growing mushrooms, if you're inoculating logs, is letting them dry out. That can kill the mushroom. But so what you're trying to do is to maintain that moisture content. And all my logs are outside. They're in shady areas with a closed canopy, so that reduces wind. So they don't dry out as quick. And it's where every time it rains, they're going to be absorbing that moisture. So if you took that log and you put it under a piece of tin, it's no longer getting the rain. It's going to dry out, and that's going to end up killing your mushroom. So if it's dead, it's dead. I don't know that you can revive it. But it's pretty rare that I believe I'm actually killing my logs by letting them dry out. I'm dramatically reducing the amount of mushrooms they produce when I let them dry out. And for the shiitake in particular, what you can do is soak them for 24 to 48 hours. And that's going to bring up the moisture content quite a bit. And it's also going to do what we call forcing the log. So if everything is outside, we're totally dependent upon the weather as to rainfall and temperatures triggering the harvest, the flush of the mushrooms. But with shiitake, if you soak a log in very cold water, oftentimes, depending on the strain, it will cause it to flush. Within 1 to 2 weeks, you're going to have a big harvest of mushrooms off that log. And that would also at the same time kind of revive your log. But that's mainly a tool that we use for shiitake production. Excuse me. Now, if you're aiming like we are to harvest all year round, then we're going to be selecting multiple strains and or species of logs. Now, if you take the path of least resistance here in the Southeast is you get shiitake and you get oysters and you get a big harvest in the fall and winter, and then that would be it. If that's all we were growing was your typical Perota species and shiitake species. And here's a photo from November. I can't, my screen's partly obscured on top, but it's from November, I think, 2019. This is our big time of the year. The shiitake in particular have to have cool nights before they're going to start producing. And then we need some type of regular rainfall. And if you're here in Alabama, it's probably pretty dry where you are. We haven't gotten any rain here for about a month. So we were getting really good production because it's our best time of the year. And then now it's down to nothing because it's been over a month since it rained. So contrasting that with indoor production, the indoor producers are going to control the environment. They're going to control the temperature, the humidity, and the moisture on those mushrooms, the light. They can control all those variables, and they can grow any species they want. Well, not any, but most of the species year round. Whereas what we grow is dependent upon the weather. Shiitake is the major mushroom that is grown commercially by small producers like us, Sweetbills Enterprises. It's the easiest to grow. It is mostly a cool to cold weather production with our peaks in the November kind of through February timeframe. And then a negligible production in the late spring through fall, almost nothing in the summer. I think it's your easiest mushroom to grow outside. It works with a wide array of tree species, so it's a generalist. It produces longer than any other species. When I inoculate a shiitake log, if it takes, and most of them do, it's going to keep producing until it turns to sawdust. So I've harvested off totems that I inoculated, I think, 6 years ago. And there's not very many of them left, and they're very fragile, and they don't produce many mushrooms. But I don't get that with any other mushroom. A lot of the mushrooms, I get 1 good year of production, and shiitake, it's multiple years. So these are all reasons why it's one of the most popular mushrooms to grow. It stores well. If we don't sell our shiitake this week that we grew this week, typically they're going to carry over and we can sell them the following week. And other mushrooms like oysters have a much shorter shelf life. Lion's mane has a great shelf life. It's one that stores very well. Most people are familiar with shiitake. When you find them here in the United States, the stores that I see carrying them, they command a good price. You know, typically in the $15 a pound. So you're even, you know, that's one mushroom that Walmart's not undercutting us on. If we try to grow button mushrooms, it wouldn't make sense for us. And we have a lot fewer pests as compared to the oyster mushrooms. So I'm really glad that we had a question as to invasive species and which ones we can use, because you know, my career has been spent in forest ecology and education, working to restore the health of the forest of the Southeast. That's for 25 years with LBW Community College and 20 years with Auburn University, working to restore the native longleaf ecosystem. And through our mushroom production, we can better the forest. And we do that by cutting out trees that shouldn't be there. And a couple good examples that work really well. The best is sawtooth. Only moderately invasive here in the Southeast, but on the other hand, I'm seeing tons of it coming up in certain localities. That's an Asian species that really shouldn't be out in our forest. The tallow or popcorn tree is a horrendous invasive, probably the #1 invasive tree species in the southeastern United States. And we can grow certain, depending on the strain of our shiitake. Some of them work fairly well with the tallow tree. Now it takes a minimal investment to get into growing mushrooms outside, and it takes a much larger investment to grow mushrooms inside. You're going to have a building, a shed with controlled environment. And, with this, I would say maybe $300 worth of stuff, and you can be growing mushrooms outside. You need a chainsaw, unless you're going to buy your logs already cut. I use wax when I do plugs or the drill and fill method. I'm going to get into both of those. You can buy plug spawn. That's the cheapest way to get into this. If you got plug spawn and a drill and a rubber hammer, you can grow shiitake or turkey tail mushrooms. I use sawdust spawn, and that requires a spawn tool. I use tags because we're inoculating multiple strains. I'm treating this like I did my forest research when I was at Auburn University. I record every log. I record the date, the size of the log, the strain that I use, that I've inoculated that log with, and then I actually record to a gram each time I harvest the mushrooms, which takes forever. If I have a big flush of mushrooms out there, I'm out there for 3 hours harvesting, whereas if I just cut them and throw them in a bucket, it would take me 15 minutes. The paper tags are going to work for generally one season, and then they're going to be illegible. They fade out. So I learned that if you're growing a shiitake log, which lasts for 5-6 years sometimes, we have to have metal tags so that we can keep track of what that is. I use Sharpies. Even though they're going to come into play, even though I'm using the metal tags. And these are the tags that we use, and I sequentially number each totem. These are for my totems. I ordered these from National Bag and Tag Company. I think it's in Kentucky. And then I have a different series with an L in front for my logs. And by the time I hit 10,000 on each of these, all those early logs will be gone, and I'll probably start over at that point. Encourage you to get a dehydrator. Partly, especially for the oysters, but right now we're in a month-long drought. Of course, at some point we'll hit a month-long flood, and a lot of those mushrooms will get soaked, and they're not going to last until the following market. When they get really, really wet, they don't last very long at all. We throw them in the dehydrator. We dehydrate them. We take these to the market, and then when we don't have a lot of fresh mushrooms, that's when we sell a lot of our dehydrated mushrooms. And again, that helps that year round. These are great too. They don't, you lose 90% of the weight of a mushroom in most of the volume when you dehydrate it. And then these keep forever. So I'm also a long distance hiker. These are great to take with you and rehydrate, include in your ramen or whatever you're eating. This is the spawn or the Mycelia and the plug tool. These bags, what it is typically it's either grain or sawdust, and they have inoculated that sawdust. They've put the mushroom in there. The mushroom fully colonizes it. And now when we take that colonized sawdust, we put that into our logs, and it takes over the log, and it produces hopefully the mushrooms that we want to harvest and eat or sell. All right, so I've got a few video clips. I'll go ahead and play this. I hope the volume comes through. This is the drill and fill method.
Is the video working for other folks? Is it just me? Okay.
No, it's not working for me. Just like a little choppy, be 5 frames scene.
It's breaking up a little bit. I wonder if we can't have these videos to share later. Would that be a thing that we could do more?
It's not coming through? The videos are not coming through?
They're not consistently coming through. And so I wonder if it's a bandwidth issue and if we can share them after the fact, if you're open to that.
I can do that. Okay. I'll have, it's only 3 to 4 videos and we can share them. Yeah. Okay. For me, I can just provide a dialogue as to what I did here.
That would be great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So, okay. That's unfortunate, but that is what we have. What I'm doing is I'm using a high-speed angle grinder with about a 5/8 inch bit, and I purchased these. I think I get these from Field and Forest. It has to have an adapter for their bits, and that's about $100. And I measure the large end diameter of the log. How many inches is it? And this one happens to be about a 3-inch diameter log. So I'm going to put in 3 rows of holes. And I'm going to put in those holes in a diamond-shaped pattern, going back and forth about every 4 to 5 inches apart. And that might be equivalent to about 10 centimeters for our international audience. And I'm going to put in 1 row of holes for each inch of diameter. And so an inch, this one was 3 inches in diameter. I'm going to put in 3 lines of holes. And then I'm going to use that plug tool. I'm going to jam it down in the mycelia, and then you shoot it into the log. All right. And let me see if I can, there's the tool. Can we see the tool? And then I'll just kind of skip it forward. And you shoot the mycelia down in the log. Does everybody see that pretty well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
It's working great.
And this is called the drill and fifth method. Okay. Excellent. So,
Thank you.
and then after we do that, excuse me, I'm gonna come back here. Let me do this. I'm gonna zip this forward. There we go. We're getting some wax, and we're gonna daub that wax, melted wax, on top of everywhere that I put the mycelia. And those little wax daubers, I get them. I also buy those from Field and Forest. They're much more effective than a foam brush or other method of applying the wax, and they cost 25 cents each. I get them 4 for $1. And we just put that over, and I wax the ends of the logs, and I put a tag on the end of the log so I can then track that log. No,
We have a question.
You can, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So sorry. There's a question Charlotte asked if you ever had an issue with birds or pests eating that spawn. Is there a difference in the way that the wax is protected?
Okay, yeah, that's a fantastic question. We used to have a large flock of free-range chickens. And there's several waxes that are available. And one year I used the wax from Fungi Perfecta. I think it's soy wax. And the chickens really like that soy wax. They pecked off all my wax. Now, that is the only issue I've ever had with birds going after my wax. And if you use paraffin, You can find it in home canning sections of your stores, or if you get, I haven't had that issue with other waxes, but the chickens really like the soy wax. So that was a lesson learned. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. And hopefully you can see that in the logs there, you can see the line of holes that I've drilled down. I've injected the mycelia, we waxed over it. This is called the crib method of stacking. This is just a way to get a whole bunch of logs in a small area and leave them until they're ready to fruit. And one thing they're going to recommend, and I've seen this happen, is use just one mushroom species in that stack. Otherwise, as the mushroom colonizes a log, everywhere one log touches another log, it will literally move from log to log. And you will end up with multiple species in the same log. And instead of getting multiple harvests, you get much less of both. They compete with each other. So we want just one mushroom species per log. And so my stacks tend to be just shiitake, just oysters, etc. And we don't want them, or we want them touching the ground as little as possible. The more your logs are in contact with the soil, you're going to have a lot of mushrooms that are going to come up through that soil and colonize your log and now compete what you're trying to grow. So that soil contact is a big no-no with almost all of these mushrooms. And then this is how it's called the TP method. This is how we put them for harvest. And there's a log with some shiitake. And you're going to want to match again the mushroom with the wood. And the shiitake here, again, I'm using an example. The WR46 is one of the ones I've been growing the longest. Now I'm using a lot more strains from Fungi Farm here in Alabama. It takes me about 3 to 4 years to really figure out what a given mushroom is going to do. But this is one I've been working with for about 10 years now. And what we see is from left to right, very little production, all the way up to a whole bunch of production. So that I've grown on totems, I've grown WR46 twice with black gum, and I've gotten just a little bit of production. And not much on the tallow of the popcorn tree with this strain here on the totems. On over to the right, and you start seeing really good strains like cherry or really good woods. The cherry is doing pretty well for me. The sweet gum is doing well, the pecan. And then those on the right, I've only tried it in this case with one sawtooth, one southern magnolia, one sugarberry. Maybe that'll continue. Maybe it won't be that dramatic as I track it over time. But there are invasives that I've tried that I've gotten zero production with. And an example would be Chinaberry. I've grown some oysters on Chinaberry. I've tried multiple strains of shiitake on Chinaberry, Melia azadirach, and I've never harvested the shiitake off those logs. So it makes a huge difference which wood you use, and it's going to depend on the species and the strain of the mushroom. Now, the least that you can spend and get into this is using what's called plug spawn. And you buy these dowels that have been colonized by a mushroom. And you drill a hole. I think it's in the United States, typically we're talking about, I think it's a 3/8 inch diameter hole. And you tap these little plugs in there. That's just how I first started, but it's not something you want to do on a large scale. It is cheap, it's simple, it's slow, but you're going to end up with sore fingers. It works for shiitake. I've grown oysters and turkey tail effectively with it. And it's not going to work for woods that want big diameter logs. That's when we're going to switch over to the totem method. So ideal logs are about maybe 3 to 5 inches in diameter. What do we got? 2.2 centimeters per inch. So this is a log I'm kind of aiming for maybe 3 to 4 inches in diameter, 3 to 4 feet long. I will use down, for instance, this is a sawtooth oak, and that works so well with many of my shiitake. I might use it on down to a 2-inch diameter log. They aren't going to last as long. They're only going to last about half as long, and maybe I'm going to get half as many mushrooms. But if I got it, I'm going to utilize it. My maximum for doing the drill or fill or the plug method might be about 5 inches. And after that, I'm going to switch over to the totem method. So, and there, see, for that, that's an example of a sugarberry, 8 inches in diameter. I'm not going to do drill and fill in it. I'm not going to put 8 rows of holes and fill in it. It takes forever, and it doesn't produce that much more than a 4-inch diameter log. So I'm going to switch in that case to the totem method. Now, for the totem method, again, we're going to need a chainsaw. We're going to add trash bags. We're going to need something to encapsulate these while they're colonizing. I'm going to use an electric drill. I'm going to use screws. We're going to need some tape and any type of paper that's relatively clean. Now, if you're aiming, in our case, for year-round production, these are what we get based upon our weather. In the spring, it's going to be lion's mane and some shiitake. As we move into the summer, it's going to be all of our reishi species, golden, red, and black. It's going to be our golden oyster, the Pleurotus citripinellus. This is a species from South America, not native to North America, but it is colonizing North America. And our summer white is a specific strain of an oyster from field and forest. It does really well in the heat of the summer. If we get into early fall, it's going to be a different species of Pleurotus called, and I can't remember which species, but they're called the Italian oysters. And then later in the fall, most of our other oyster strains come online. Our lion's mane, our early shiitake, and in about November is when we start getting our peak shiitake, our peak lion's mane, and our other mushrooms like olive oysterling, namako, turkey tail, and polar white is a very cold weather oyster. It doesn't come until later. It's our last one to come. Okay, I think I already covered this piece here. And I have a video clip, we'll share this later, of me cutting a totem. I cut it in 3 pieces. I cut a 1-inch top and then 2 pieces off the bottom. So what money is on there, I'm going to make 2 totems out of that. Each totem will be roughly 14 to 16 inches in height. But I'll cut them, I'll have some as short as 10 inches. And I'll have some as high as 20 inches. I'm going to run a short clip. If it doesn't work, Sophie, did that one come through, or is it still breaking up?
It's a little faster, but it's still choppy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But I think as long as you're able to kind of see what it looks like. Now, if we cut into the wood and we see discoloration, that wood is supposed to be all creamy, and you see the dark colors there, that means we've waited too long and another mushroom is eating that wood. So you've got a time frame when you cut that tree until you can inoculate it. And if you wait too long, you're going to be competing with other species of mushrooms that have already colonized that tree. And it's going to reduce what you harvest of your mushroom. In some cases, you wait too long, you'll get nothing. But when I cut into that tree, I prefer it. I don't want to see that discoloration. If I see that, I know I've waited too long. That's a clip we'll share of me doing the entire totem method. Let me back up, and I'm just going to drag the video over to where we can. There. All right. So that totem. Now, how did we do that? I'm going to take 2 trash bags. Now, if you read what's recommended through Field and Forest and Fungi Perfecti and some of them, they have PDFs available, free PDFs telling you how to do the drill and fill. They have free PDFs on how to do the totem method. And they're going to recommend 1 real heavy duty black trash bag. And if you go and buy those heavy duty trash bags, they might be approaching 50 cents each. So we're doing roughly 500 to 800 totems a year. That adds up. I get several $100s in trash bags. I buy the cheapest white 13-gallon trash bags, and I double them up because one will inevitably tear. If I do 2 of them, and I take those 2 trash bags and I put a double handful of that Mycelia in the bottom of the bag. And then I put the bottom portion of that totem in there. And I take the Mycelia and I make a pancake. I cover the top of that totem. And then I put the next piece of the totem on top. And now we've got a piece about, 12 inches, 14 inches high, maybe about 30 centimeters. And I drill it, I put 2 drills in there to hold it together, and I make another pancake of the Mycelia. I grab that sawdust and I rub it so I can't see the top of the wood, and I put my top piece on, I screw it on, and I make 1 more pancake of Mycelia, and then I close it up in the bags. And what the trash bags are going to do, are they're going to prevent spores from competing fungi to coming in and colonizing that wood. It's protecting my wood, plus keeping the moisture content there long enough for my mushroom to fully colonize that wood. And then I'm going to put this, my totems are inside those trash bags, and they're going to go outside. Because we have a relatively moderate environment here in Lower Alabama, I don't have a problem with super cold weather killing that Mycelia. They just sit outside for 1 to 3 months, and then I open the bags up and allow them to produce. These are spent logs, the ones that are done. Mostly there's going to be oyster totems because, again, the shiitake is going to produce until it just falls apart on you. But I'll pile these up, and then I'll fill all of that area in the center with compost and soil, and we use these are our version of a raised bed garden. Essentially, our logs become part of that garden. When do you inoculate? In the fall, when our deciduous leaves are falling, and through early spring. As the temperatures go up in the spring and summer, we're going to see a lot of problems arising with our inoculation. These mushrooms want a cool environment to colonize that log. If I were to try to do this in the summer, I would probably inoculate those logs and bring them inside where they would be in air-conditioned weather, because it's fairly common when I've tried inoculating July and August to go through a lot of effort and to get nothing out. Essentially, the hot weather kills that Mycelia before it colonizes the log. So, ideal time frame in the Southeast and much of the Midwest will be, again, when you're seeing the leaves fall on most of our deciduous trees, that's the time to get going and try to be done before it really warms up in the spring. Now, this is what it might cost you to do 1 log or 1 totem, assuming it costs you $25 to buy that bag of Mycelium. I'm going to get about 30 logs using the drill and fill method with one bag versus the totem method. I might only get 7. I'm going to use 1 screw with the drill and fill, 4.5 screws on average with the totem method. Work on through all this. My estimate, your estimated cost, that's the first number here for 1 log. If we use that $25 number for mycelium, would be $1.15 to inoculate that log. And that's assuming also time. Then we add in time and I used a $20 an hour number, and 7.5 minutes per log, 3.25. And versus 5.73 per totem. You get more if you do drill and fill more logs versus the totem method. Now I brought those numbers over to the next page. And then I picked out 1 strain on 1 wood, WR46 on sweet gum, using a totem method. On logs, the log method, I've done that. I had 21 logs in these numbers. I averaged 649 grams of shiitake per log. That's essentially 1.5 pounds. And if we looked at the yield per cubic foot of wood inoculated, I got 3.5 pounds per cubic foot. With the totem method, I've done 50 sweet gum totems using WR46, average yield of 955, about 1 kilogram per totem, or 2 pounds, and the average yield approximating 7 pounds per cubic foot. So we get more yield per cubic foot using the totem method. But overall, if you're looking at how can I grow the most mushrooms with a bag of mycelia, it's going to be using the drill and fill with shiitake. But that's with shiitake. Here's some pictures of our Italian oysters. Again, this is our early fall oyster, and this is growing on some softwoods. Maybe sweet bay magnolias, something like that. And I don't get very good production doing drill and fill on small diameter logs. It wants a large diameter log, so I end up using the totem method for my Italian oysters. That's where I grow virtually all my Italian, and that's my main early fall producer. Polo white, I do pretty well using both the drill and fill on the logs and the totem method. And that's going to be my last oyster to produce in the fall. Some invasives we can use here in the Southeast. I've been able to grow several strains of oysters on Chinaberry. Parasol tree is a great oyster producer. Now, and again, this is a problematic tree. If you plant a couple parasol trees in your area and you walk away a few decades down the road, there's going to be thousands of parasol trees and several acres of that as it spreads out and takes over the forest. So if you can cut those down and turn them into oyster mushrooms, you're doing something good. Same thing with the tallow tree. Yeah, I have to be specific about which strain works with my tallow, with the oysters, and the same with the shiitake, but I can grow both of them. Elms, there's several invasive elms, the Chinese and the Siberian elm. They can be very invasive in our forest, but they are great for growing oysters. And then the camphor tree is a big invasive species in the Florida Panhandle, and it does very, very well with oysters, but none of those are going to work except for the tallow tree. That's the only one of those that I can grow some shiitake on. None of those others work for shiitake. Some other invasives that we utilize, the privets, they really can grow some turkey tail. And there's some pretty good A lot of people are interested in turkey tail because of some anti-cancer properties. I believe that has actually been documented in some NIH studies. Mimosa has been kind of a pain for us, but it will grow ear mushrooms. Had very limited luck with oysters and no luck with shiitake on mimosa. Tree of Heaven is another one I haven't done a lot with, but it can be fairly prolific with wood ear. Auricularia is the Latin on the ear mushrooms. So our golden oyster is kind of more of a specialist. I primarily grow it on willows, cottonwoods. I'm looking more at oak. I shortchanged oak for a while. Polar white works on a wide variety of woods. By and large, I mainly use what I call soft hardwoods, not conifers, but hardwoods that are like willows and tulip poplars and trees like that. That's mainly what I grow my oysters on. And here's an example with the golden oyster, which is Porotus citripinellus. And what we find grafting from left to right is increasing yield per cubic foot. And so really dramatic on that. American elm, not something you're going to find real easily down here, but it did well on a Chinese elm. That's an invasive tree species. Our farm in Missouri is covered up with American elm. They might get up to about 12 inches in diameter, and then the Dutch elm disease kills them, but by then they've already reproduced, so they're all up and down the fence rows. So I harvest that American elm and get some fantastic oyster mushroom production off from it. Chinese parasol is doing very well in this case with our golden oyster. Nameko is a cold weather mushroom. It's from Asia. Wonderful to eat. We're not making any money growing it. I can guarantee you that. And it's a real specialist. I've only been able to grow it on cherry and sweet gum so far. And it takes, on a lot of our logs, it takes 2 years before it produces. And I'm only growing it on totems so far. Olive oysterling or mukitake, I really like this one because it doesn't have problems with fungus gnats. We're doing a little better with it. We're growing it on oaks, and we're only growing it with the totem method. Lion's mane. Man, yeah, I love lion's mane. There's Paul Stamets talks a lot about this in his books and publications. I think it's actually a little bit psychoactive. It kind of makes me happy after I eat it. And I have several patients, I have several customers who come and buy it for family members who have brain issues, Alzheimer's, what have you, and they think it helps them. How do you use it? I like to cut it in strips, saute it in butter and garlic salt, and include it in particular in our omelets. It makes for a really rich omelet. That's one way we utilize it. And I'm only getting lion's mane on totems. I've utterly failed with drill and fill method. It's once a big diameter tree, primarily oaks. Now, up in the Northeast, there's a professor at Cornell, I think Cornell University, promoting lion's mane at farmers markets. They're using sugar maple, Acer saccharum, and American beech, Fagus grandifolia, to grow up there. I've only had luck with oaks here in the Southeast, and I've only had luck with fungi farm strain here in Alabama. Something about the northern strains that I bought from Fungi Perfecti and Field and Forest have done very little production for me, but I do great with the strains that Fungi Farm has collected here in the wild in Alabama. Those are doing really well for me. here's what your shiitake, when they come out, again, that's called a flush. And the mushrooms themselves we call buttons. And if it's fairly relatively warm and moist, they grow very rapidly. If it's dry and cold, like it's been lately, then they grow very slow. And you're going to want to harvest them before the outside of that cap flares out. While it's still turned in, then when the veil disappears, you look underneath the mushroom, is what's called a veil. It looks like a spider web. When it disappears, then generally the mushroom is done growing and you harvest it at that point. The easiest method, okay, I said, the plug method was cheap. An even cheaper way to grow a lot of these mushrooms is to collect and pile wood. And we do this again for our raised beds. I'm watching and collecting. This happens to be a sweet bay magnolia. I did not inoculate that log. Same thing with tulip poplar. When those trees fall down, within 1 year of that tree being felled or killed, a large percentage of the time, they're going to produce oyster mushrooms. So when I see those logs, I collect them and I use them as walls in future raised beds. And I don't even bother to inoculate them, and I end up with oysters coming out of them. If you find pecan out there, pecan will consistently grow wood ear for us. So I don't leave. When I'm probably a dangerous driver in an urban environment because I'm always watching what people have piled on the side of the road, and I will stop and pull over, then collect all these woods. I mean, they're paying the city to take them away. Nobody complains, and I go and get their tulip poplar and the sweet bay magnolia and the pecans, and incorporate these into my raised bed gardens. And again, pretty consistently, certain tree species, when they die, you have about a year of good mushroom production, even without you putting the first plug in them. Giant Stropharia or a wine cap is grown on wood chips. That's a different method. You chip up hardwoods, you put the mycelia in that bed, and I think I've had, the first time I did this, I got giant Stropharia all over the place, and I failed multiple times since then. So I'm doing something wrong, but the time that it really worked, I did my inoculation early fall, October, November, and by February, I was growing these giant mushrooms out of the bed. Really, really good. And now when I try to make beds, I don't get anything, but anytime I make a pile of sawdust, they come up on their own. This is a mushroom that's native to North America, but mainly further west and north. And now it's in my yard environment. So again, when I create the right environment, which is I make a pile of chips or sawdust in the process of doing this, they end up colonizing it themselves and coming up. So that's the only one I grow using that method. Some of our outdoor pests. This is a real problem with oyster mushrooms. It's called the slime mold, and it's something actually slightly different from a fungi. I forget the exact classification, but this will colonize my oysters very rapidly, and it just turns them to slime, and then you end up throwing them away. So this is something they're not going to have an issue with in an indoor environment. This is an outside, wet, summer issue with oysters, and fall when it's hot and wet. When I see that, if you see that in the morning, you could cut out the yellow and put it, the rest of the mushroom that doesn't have the slime mold, you put it in your fridge and it's fine. If I was to see that in the morning, go to work and come back, by the end of the day, that entire mushroom would be nothing but yellow slime. It grows very, very rapidly. Having all these couple thousand logs out here in South Alabama, which I'm in the middle of the forest, it is ideal, the ideal habitat for copperheads. So we do have copperheads in amongst our logs. And I don't leave them there when I catch them. Marisa won't let me kill them anymore, so we haul them off. We put them in a cooler and carry them down the road and dump them out on national forest where they've got thousands of other copperhead friends. But you do have to pay attention here in the Southeast and don't put your fingers where you can't see. You pick the log up. You don't reach underneath a log in a hole and pick up your logs, because we do create habitat for copperheads. That large beetle is called a best beetle, and they're a pretty cool beetle, but they are a pain when you're going logs, because they burrow up into my logs and hollow out the logs. So a log that should last 5 years ends up lasting a year and a half because of the best beetles. When I see a pile of sawdust by my totem, I take that totem and I put it in a tank of water, and that causes the best beetles to move out. And I have a specific area in a tank where I put the best beetles and let them eat out their day on wood that's not my logs. But they're a real pain. I grow an increasing amount of reishi. Black reishi from Fungi Farm has been the only one I think I'm making money off from. I'm sure I am. It's doing really well. After a couple of seasons of growing it, I started noticing it's called the pleasing fungus beetles, and they burrow into my mushrooms. And if you're not actively going out and collecting these little guys, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of pleasing fungus beetles and no reishi. And I forget the name of this little guy, this little tank-shaped beetle. It does the exact same thing on my reishi mushrooms. So again, you don't have issues if you're doing this inside in a closed environment. Outside, you're dealing with all this. That's what a log looks like if you let the best beetles do their thing. They just completely hollow it out from top to bottom. And it does have a shiitake on the outside, but it really reduces the lifespan of your logs. Anybody got a guess as to what happened with this log?
Is that a beaver?
I'll go ahead and tell you. See, that's a good guess. But I saw the culprit, and we were a long ways away from water. What happened was we had best beetles inside the log, and the pileated woodpeckers came for the best beetles. So this is what a pileated woodpecker will do to your logs in very short order if you have larvae inside of them. Fungus gnats are just an absolute pain in the butt with oyster mushrooms. They get on the mushrooms. Now, I have a video clip. We'll share it later because it's not working here. But I hang fly strips. Well, let's see. Can I do it? Let me go back. There. I hang these fly strips when the fungus gnats are out there. And I'm going to skip. Let me see if I can skip forward. There you go. And literally you can hang it there and watch them land on it and get stuck. And that doesn't eliminate the fungus gnats. But with all of these critters, if you're not working to reduce their numbers, you're just gonna keep multiplying them until you have nothing left. And again, you don't have issues with this if you're working inside. And that's what they do to your oyster mushrooms, is they turn them into mush. And that's my final slide. So I tried to address the questions that came up further, but at this point, if we got time for questions and answers, man, I'm glad to go into that.
I do. I have a list of questions that have been going in the chat throughout. I'm going to clump them into two different sets. The first questions are going to be technical questions, and then there are some overarching questions about other things. So one question is, can you preserve mushrooms or mycelium in honey? It's asked from a community herbalist perspective.
Oh, I have no idea. The way I preserve them has been dehydrate them, but The other ways I know that people preserve these mushrooms is pickling. That's very popular in Europe. They'll pickle a lot of their the bolete mushrooms over there. And another good way to preserve them is to saute them and freeze them in bags. And they keep much better if you saute, get that a lot of that moisture content out of them in the cooking process. Go ahead and get the butter and the salt in there, and then you can warm them up and use them. I know that some of the I think Fungi Farm here is producing something from mushrooms that you feed the bees and it helps reduce mite problems. But I can't address, preserving them in honey.
Gotcha. Thank you. Another question, have you had any success with the king oyster?
No, the king oysters, as I understand it, is primarily grown on other substrates like straw and what have you, whereas I grow on solid wood or wood chips. So that is primarily grown inside in inside production.
A question about the plastic that you used in the totem method. Is there a product or a substance that can be used instead of plastic for those who try not to use plastic?
Yes, that's an excellent question, because this is a lot of plastic, and I feel bad about that. I think if I remember correctly, again, I encourage people to look at the major producers of mycelia in the tools that we utilize. Fungi Farm here in Alabama, Field and Forest up in Michigan or Wisconsin, Fungi Perfecti. And I believe one of those, they try to offer up some alternatives to plastic using the lawn and garden paper bags and a certain method. And I think it can work. I think you're probably going to see a reduction in efficacy, a little less yield, maybe a little more contamination, but there are ways to get around that. And that might be in that PDF from Field and Forest.
Okay, thank you. A question about shaggy bark hickory logs. Have you had any success growing any type of mushroom in those?
I have used shagbark, shellbark, mockernut, and then some of the others. So that's I actually taught dendrology. Shagbark is Caryovata, shellbark Caryovata sinuosa. Our mockernut is a common one here in Alabama. It's Carya tomentosa. They have worked to varying degrees for shiitake production. They need to be fresh. I remember one year they did a timber harvest on a neighbor's and left a bunch of shagbark land out there. And a few months later, I cut that wood and inoculated, and I didn't get any out of it. And I'm afraid that I waited too long and something else colonized it. The Carya genus does tend to work for shiitake. Pecan is Carya illinoisensis. That is one of my major woods that I grow shiitake and oysters on. So I think you can probably do pretty well with a lot of your shiitake strains, anything in that genus.
Thank you. Awesome. A couple of questions about location. A question about opportunities to grow mushrooms in the frames of urban agriculture projects. And do you have thoughts about that?
I think it's ideal because you can do so much in such a little space. If I'm inoculating 1,000 logs annually, we probably have 3,000 logs out here, and they occupy some fraction of an acre. So I think your major requirement outside is that they're getting regular precipitation, and they're protected from a lot of direct sun. It can be dappled sunlight. That's fine. You don't want them in direct sun all day. It's just going to dry them out. You're going to lose them in that case. I think it's is perfectly suited for urban agriculture. And, you know, I'm continuing this experiment, inoculating every strain against every wood I can find. There's just so many different woods that are available to you, and a lot of them are invasive species in an urban setting. So if you watch, I mean, every city I've been in, people are cutting down trees and piling it up for the city to haul away. I go to that urban dumps, and collect truckload after truckload after truckload of wood, but I also pick it up driving down the street. And so it's there. The wood is free and it's available if you can learn to identify the woods to some, you know, with some degree of competency. So I think this is better suited than raising most vegetable gardens, because they take up a lot more space and in comparison.
What do you think about partnerships between state and private sectors in developing enough big mushroom farms to effectively supply? Do you have thoughts on that?
Oh, okay. Can you repeat that? Let me see if I can figure that one out again. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about
Right.
partnerships between state and private sectors in development of enough big mushroom farms for more effective supply of mushrooms?
All right. One thing that I have considered, and I may or may not do, I got so many big ideas that I get distracted, and I need to finish up, you know, this book and certain projects before I jump off into the next thing that eats up my life for several years. But you know, if you area like Pensacola, a few years ago, they had just for their tree waste, they had an area, it was over 100 acres that was occupied piling wood, and it caught fire, because if you pile enough wood in in an area over a certain period of time, this has happened in a lot of sawmills in the past with sawdust, it generates heat and it catches on fire, and it created an environmental catastrophe that, you know, smoked in vast areas for months at a time. So, you know, that's what happened when you waste all of this wood. You're not putting it to use. Now, so what if you have somebody like me who knows what all the woods are? I can tell by just looking at the bark or a tree or a seed. You know, I can tell by looking at the grain what species we have there most of the time. And you were able to take that wood and you grew mushrooms with some of it. And some of the rest you made into the grilling and smoking woods. I produced 24 grilling and smoking chunks that I sell into stores in the Panhandle. And then some of it you saw into lumber, and I do custom mantelpieces and bar tops. They're going into, there's different bars now in Pensacola just with my wood slabs from this reclaimed wood. And then you put some of it into firewood. And you could utilize virtually every piece of wood that's going into those dumps. And it doesn't take these advanced college degrees I have. It just takes knowing your wood and some degree of mechanical aptitude. And I think you could do away with these mega dumps and create an untold number of jobs for any inner city youth or whoever wanted to work with this, with a resource that is an expense. It's an expense when you have to haul it away and put it in the dump. You turn it into all these resources. And I think that would be the ideal marriage of public and private, if we could get woodworkers teaching people how to turn bowls, and me teaching them how to inoculate mushrooms, and someone else doing the carpentry with all the wood that we're throwing away. That's one vision I have.
That's beautiful. I love that. Can you share more information about the time length between cutting trees to the time of inoculation, especially as it relates to urban wood or log?
Fantastic. Fantastic question. So the most of the publications on this that you read from the Field and Forest and stuff are going to recommend some period of time for the tree to die, because the tree has natural defenses against fungi taking over them from the time it's cut. Now, I've had way more problems with waiting too long, I believe, than inoculating too quickly. So my short answer is the quicker the better, between harvesting that tree and inoculating it. And then the colder the weather, the slower it gets colonized. I think you have a bigger window in the winter months when you cut a tree versus the summer months. And you can watch this, that discoloration of the wood is called blue stain. And you see that happen much quicker when it's 90 degrees outside versus it's 40 degrees outside. So quicker is better. When you cut into the wood, if you see the discoloration, again, that's a warning sign that somebody's already beat you there. Then denser woods, that competition comes slower, and lighter woods, that competition comes faster. And as a broad rule, for instance, tulip poplar, I want to inoculate it really quick, versus oak. Okay, I can wait a few more weeks on that. Those are some just broad recommendations on that.
If someone is pruning their pear tree this winter, do you recommend that as a substrate for any particular mushroom?
Pear has been terrible for me. See, one of the most common urban trees and one of the most fragile urban trees is the Bradford pear, which, when it crosses with other strains, has become, or probably is going to become, North America's second most problematic invasive tree species, which is Pyrus kelleriana. And I've tried everything with pear and have gotten no oyster production, no shiitake production. I have seen certain rishis and I think turkey tail growing off from it naturally, so I'm going to explore those two. But I can tell you, you're probably going to fail with the big ones, the oyster and the shiitake. But it's also my number 4 selling smoking wood. It is an ideal wood to smoke turkeys and steaks with. And the butt portions, makes a beautiful orange wood. So I supply bowl turners, what we call blocks or blanks. I'll cut those into big chunks of wood, and then people turn bowls and pins out of that wood. It's a gorgeous orange wood that is very well suited for turning.
Very cool. Okay, so 2 more questions. For the drill and fill method, I've read some things about soaking and shocking logs in water to stimulate production. Is that something you recommend?
I recommend that with the shiitake. And you're not going to see a response with oysters or lion's mane. What you can do is, if you feel your logs are getting light, they're getting too dry, you can get that moisture content back up by soaking them, but it won't work to make them flush. It does work with the shiitake. And before I forget, for the international audience, they put in a plantation of Eucalyptus benthami down by us. Worldwide, one of the most available genuses of trees is eucalyptus. And now there's hundreds of species of eucalyptus, but you can find eucalyptus here. You can find it in the Andes of Peru. You can find it planted, I'm assuming, in Israel, because it does very well in dry environments. And I am getting really good production of my shiitake and most of my oyster strains off eucalyptus. So I should throw that out there.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, one last question for you. Do you ever offer hands-on workshops to teach participants the process and they can leave with their own inoculated log?
Yes, I do that. I do it generally about once a year from our place here in Lower Alabama. I'll do a foraging and production classes. And in February, I've been asked to come do one up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've done them before for the Birmingham Botanical Garden. Various entities will essentially, pay me to come put on these classes across the Southeast. So I do a weekly email. Anybody that wants to reach out to us can message me their email through our site, Sweet Bill's Mushrooms and Smoking Woods. I'll add you the email. Then I put out word on that, or you just can follow our Facebook page and I'll put announcements there. But I know I've got one in February in Tennessee, and I'll schedule something down here in Lower Alabama, probably in the March timeframe.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions that I missed or anyone would like to bring to the table? We put the link to Mark's website in the chat, so please take a look at that. Mark, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing this knowledge with us. And this has been really educational. I love it. This has been great. Thank you.
I enjoyed it, the heck out of it. Yeah.
I love it. I hope you'll come back again.
Okay.
As I said earlier today in the session, these will be put up on YouTube later, and I will get those videos from Mark so that we can include those in some way to make sure that everyone can see them. I do want to take a moment to say thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing the space, and it's really great to see some of you and to see some of you for brand new moments. As most of you know, ASAN is a membership-led organization. So here's me saying it would be really cool if you would consider membership if you haven't already. This year, ASAN has deepened our commitment to being a values-driven, farmer-centric, member-led grassroots network. We are strengthening our collective muscles to address the most pressing challenges farmers and aspiring farmers are facing: access to capital, to land, and environmental threats. There is a place for you in this movement if you want to be here. So please feel welcome to become a member today. The link to become a member has been put into the chat by Mona. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing this space with us. Mark, thanks again. It's been great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope to see you all at other sessions during the forum. Remember, it goes on until December 12th. So we'll see you all very soon. And in the meantime, have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Have a good
Thank
night.
you, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, Marcus. You're welcome. So, yeah.